Right, a beautiful introduction there. And I'd like to begin our live streaming podcast today for the Earthstock Wisdom Council and beyond. I want to thank Gail Thomas for that amazing piece of video and collaborative music to start today's broadcast. We are going to switch from these beautiful, lovely, uplifting images to a shadowy, darker topic that actually needs to have some light shed on it, not just verbally or symbolically, but really literally, and with a message that's so relevant in today's world. So again, I want to thank all of you for joining us. You can share this link off of the YouTube Live for live participation and input, thoughts, questions, feedback. And also you can share the link after the live broadcast if you'd like to share some of the information, and not just information, but the wisdom that we're discussing here tonight. So just to start with, I'd like to welcome the members of the Grandmother Council and the Wisdom Council. I'd like to start with all the way in Asheville, North Carolina. I'd like to welcome Grandmother Gail Thomas. And if we're very fortunate, Grandmother Gail might share a song with all of us later today. And then all the way in Brazil, our amazing grandmother Patricia, also known as Pachi Mama, bringing the wisdom up from the land of the condors and from the Amazon and from Brazil, from the south. So welcome, Grandmother Patricia. And this week, I'm here in Nevada City. I'm not hiding in my underground bunker in the Rockies. I'm actually here in Nevada City, also known as a city of light. I like to call it Nirvana City because it's a place where a lot of people gather here, especially at times of crisis and collapse and transitions. But I'm really happy and honored. A great friend of mine, but also a grandmother and a carrier of a lot of wisdom. I'd like to welcome Grandmother Marcia. And part of this weekly council that we hold on Mondays, every Monday, the Grandmother Council, we also have our Wednesday Wisdom Council, where we open up the conversation a little more focused on the voice of well, the voice of men and women and youth and whoever would like to participate in that. But very honored to introduce, and again, someone who I've had the opportunity to develop a friendship with, not here just online, but also as a guardian and sun dancer, all the way from the northeastern woodlands of Canada. I'd like to welcome our brother and wisdom keeper, Lenny. And of course, we'd also like to welcome Pamela, who shows up here and offers technical support so that all of us can kind of focus on the topics at hand. Yeah, as many of you know, who also do Zoom and podcasts, there's a lot of technology sometimes involved. So we would like to thank Pamela for her support today. And I'm Michael DiMartino. Again, I'm here in Nevada City at the moment. It's strangely a very warm and beautiful day. We just had a light rain, and I'm here in downtown area, which is kind of living history, of course, going back through a lot of the indigenous cultures here of the Nisinan, and also of the areas, territories surrounding of the Maidu, but also one of the epicenters of colonization here during the gold rush, and really a living history book of so many amazing things. And it feels feels pertinent to be talking on the porch of this historic Victorian house here that's probably about 150 years old, because it does tie into subject matter. So without any further ado, today's podcast is focused on destructive and malevolent forces that negatively influence humanity, the sacred group, and are actually aiding and abetting in the destruction of so much right now. So whether they call it Wetiko or Wendigo or spirits or demons or vibrations, we're going to continue to explore on episode 2, where we're talking about how, from direct personal experience, how we identify these negative forces, these forces that can affect us and be very divisive and destructive and really create a lot of harm for people on the planet. So with that, I will pass the feather over to Grandmother Gail Thomas.
Thank you, Michael. I do feel like it's appropriate to sing our protection song with this topic. So I will open my part of this conversation, of this wonderful opportunity to share with our very old Salagi song for protection. You're all welcome to join me, of course, in any way that you're comfortable. And protection is one of the things that we want to really keep in mind on this topic. We will cover that in our next session in January. But first, we want to help you learn to recognize when you're being affected by these dark forces. And in our indigenous ways, we are constantly in contact with the energies around us. We are not traditionally in the Western way of human to human and primarily mind-oriented exchanges. We are more tuned into energetic exchanges and the fact that energies are constantly changing. So we are in spirit to spirit communion with all life around us. with the trees, the plants, the stones, the water, the sky, the animals, and humans, of course, each other. But we are getting our information from many sources. And of course, one of those sources is our own intuition. So we are very in tune with thoughts that just come in the quantum physics way instead of the linear colonized way. So anytime you perceive something in that way, and the difference in intuition and just thinking is that intuition comes from nowhere. If you're thinking about something and you get an idea, that's still the little ego identity mind speaking to maintain identity. It's not the awareness of the soul or the awareness, that comes from quantum physics field around us. It generally is off topic. For example, if you're standing in front of the refrigerator trying to decide what to have for lunch, and all of a sudden you think of spinach, well, that's thinking. Okay, if you're walking the dog and not even hungry, and all of a sudden you know you need to have spinach for lunch, that's intuition. And that's a very deep level of information that comes to us and really carries a lot more than we realize sometimes. So you will get these feelings, you will get this energy, spirit to spirit, from all life around you. Okay, and one of the most predictable and easy to read ways of knowing when there are dark spirits entering the room is through the animals, your pets that are in there in the house with you. My dog knows exactly every energy that enters the room. When I'm singing a song like I just did, he lets me know when the helpful spirits that I have a relationship with, the spirits that have done their work, when they show up and respond to the songs, especially to that song asking for protection, he knows it immediately. And if it's a malevolent, dark spirit, like the ones we're speaking about tonight, I know by looking at him, at his reaction, that there is a different energy in the room that I need to be aware of, that I need to address and deal with immediately. So animals, even if they're not your pet, even the wild animals will give you this information. And we also get this information in dreams. If there's something we're not aware of and we need protection, we need information, we will often get it in our dreams from our ancestors, from our soul, from our experiences. It comes from so many places. Also comes from our psyche, you know? And unfortunately, it comes from substances that we are under the influence of that will especially open us up to the dark forces and the dark energies. But we don't have the awareness under the influence of those substances to deal with these things effectively. So we need to be aware of that and, ask for help or whatever we need to do in the situation we're in. We also can recognize these energies because they show up very unexpectedly. They show up from the same energy of quantum field around us rather than linear. So when something shows up that we don't expect, that we can't explain with linear thought, we need to really be in tune with our awareness to determine if that is something we need protection from. So that sometimes our body tells us, if we get those chills along the spine that we talk about, or also, some people will actually see shadows or feel shadows when they're in this state. And I can actually when I close my eyes, I see auras, and I can look at people when they ask me to. I don't do this without permission. Sometimes it's glaring. Like after someone does ayahuasca, they come in like a neon billboard and they don't realize it. And they're so surprised when I say, "Have you just done ayahuasca?" And they say, "Oh, I didn't want you to know." You know, they try to hide it, but it really takes over their entire aura and body, the whole energy field around them. And it brings in what some people refer to as the uninvited spirits, because we only want to work with those we invite and those that have done their work. And that will keep us from being open to these invasions from uninvited spirits. Also, when we're around the energy of someone using these methods, channeling, that one is really, really coming to mind. And anything, that's not using discernment of working only with spirits they have a relationship with, and they know that those spirits have done their work, or their individual ancestors that have done their work. When we are around these people, like those psychic fairs and things, we are open to all of the energies there. Because when we participate in the darkness, we open to the entire astral realm around Earth. This is where these earthbound spirits are stuck. And so we open to everything there if we open ourselves at all. So we want to be very careful about the company we keep and the environment that we find ourselves in, and the way we develop the relationship with our own spirit helpers. We want to be really careful about that. And develop the discernment for those things, as well as our own personal shadow work. This is a topic that's getting tossed around carelessly in popular ways now. The shadow work. In my training as Jungian depth psychology specialist, we're taught that we're not capable of doing shadow work effectively until we have a really strong, rooted archetypal awareness and choice. Okay, and when I say that, there is a lot of influence in the collective these days from the archetypal human patterns. Those energies are tremendous. I'll give you an example. When Jung was developing this empirical science, that means if you do the same thing, you get the same results. It was just prior to World War II when he realized and made the statement that Wotan was running wild in the streets of Europe, and Wotan is the god of war. So he was trying to prepare people and explain to people and step into this energy, and he didn't get a good response. So he ended up going to his home in Bollingen on the lake and going into his inner work, which is really helpful in these situations. Like the times that we're in right now, the archetypal human patterns are actually running wild. They're very dominant in the collective energy in the times that we're in. And we need to be aware of the difference between our own psychological wounds in the developmental stages that we've been wounded in, and how they will influence our own personal shadow. When we are in our 20s, we wear a mask, trying to find where we belong. And if that mask stays with us, then it creates the shadow, our own personal shadow, along with the wounding in our developmental stages. And that is our own shadow, which is not as dangerous. It can be, but it's still normally not as dangerous as these archetypal and these dark forces that can possess us. For example, the most common collective archetypal force that I see these days is the authority archetypal pattern, sometimes called the savior complex, or the mother archetype. actually rather complex, or any authority, any feeling of an authority archetypal pattern that's out of control or out of balance, you know, that's taking over and running the collective or possessing the collective, can be balanced with an instinctual animal nature. That's what actually keeps us alive, is the instincts. And we say now that we're coming into, you know, the fifth world, where the animals are teaching us to be our most human. And if we learn well and do this, then we will continue as long as we're able to be our most human in the fifth world. This wave of humans will continue on Earth. And if we don't do that, then this wave will not continue like so many other waves of humans that have come before us. So if it's your own shadow, you'll have a feeling of not being yourself. Okay? It'll be a familiar feeling if it's your own shadow, but it will be a very surprising, almost shocking feeling if it's a dark force or a dark entity. And you'll be surprised by your unexplainable actions or interactions on the level that's your own shadow, that you have a quick choice, an immediate choice, an inner choice with, or if it's a dark entity, you'll have to work a little harder. You'll have to really develop the awareness. The ego has awareness that knows how to deal and clear this energy quickly as you can. You don't know what you're going to get into. Okay? They're very different feelings. And the authority, you know, for some of the examples of the archetypal patterns possessing us are when authority is harming instead of helping. We see that in a lot of ways. You know, authority should be helpful to humans. When the wisdom is using tricks and manipulation instead of guidance, that's an indication that there's a possession by that archetypal pattern. When the warrior is competitive or abusive instead of protective and taking their guidance from the wisdom archetypal pattern, that's an indication of possession by an archetypal pattern. Okay, so the shadow work is only available when we have strong, deep roots in our own archetypal patterns, which there's 4 of them and they balance. It's Tony Wolf's work, if you want to look at the Jungian part of it as, you know, as an understanding, a way of deepening your own understanding. And then I'm going to jump right into the thick of things, the possessions by the dark spirits at their most dark and frightening level. This is a quote that Jung used to explain his 7 sermons for the dead. And he shares it in the memoir that he worked with Ania Jaffe. And he also shares it in his most recent book, which is his effort of explaining things that were very personal to him. It's the latest book and it's fascinating. But here's the quote. And if Pamela is able to, she can show you this quote while I read it to you. Jung's experience in memories, dreams, reflections. Jung gives one account of how the 7 sermons came to be written. Sunday referred to below is probably January 30th, 1916. And he says, it began with a restlessness, but I did not know what it meant or what they wanted of me. There was an ominous atmosphere all around me. I had the strange feeling that the air was filled with ghostly entities. Then it was as if my house began to be haunted. Around 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, the front doorbell began ringing frantically, but there was no one in sight. I was sitting near the doorbell and not only heard it, but saw it moving. We all simply stared at one another. The atmosphere was thick, believe me. Then I knew that something had to happen. The whole house was filled as if there were a crowd present, crammed full of spirits. They were packed deep right up to the door, and the air was so thick it was scarcely possible to breathe. Okay, that was Jung's feeling. And also in our indigenous traditional ways, we have myths that prepared everyone to recognize and understand these energies. I'll just briefly tell you a little bit of our Salagi myth that helped to recognize and stand as community in protection from these dark entity possessions. This one is called Spearfinger. And it's normally an old woman with her shawl wrapped around her right hand because she has this long pointing finger that has a blade on the end of it. And she can show up as a family member. She can take over to the extent that she actually looks like a family member, and she keeps this blade hidden all the time. And she uses this to cut out the liver of children and adults because she feeds on the liver. She feeds on the toxicity of humans, the toxicity that we allow to enter and the toxicity that we store up in our body is her food. And so she comes to cut out the liver and feed on the liver. And the community came together to trick her and to capture her. And when they did, she fell into the pit, and they kept shooting arrows at her heart, where her heart normally, or human heart normally is. But that wasn't working. So the chickadee came and landed on her right hand and showed them that she had her heart out of balance. Her heart was actually in her right palm, going out, feeding on people, instead of in the center between receiving and giving. Our heart balances receiving and giving between our two hands. So they were able to shoot the arrows into her heart in her right hand. And there's more to the story. I encourage you to look it up online and read about Spearfinger if you're interested in this topic. And thank you for this opportunity tonight. And I will pass that feather back to Michael and on to the next grandmother.
All right, we're going to go to Patricia in Brazil. And again, a lot more stories, mythology, and direct experience in regards to these malevolent and negative energies that are destructive and harmful. So welcome, Patricia.
Thank you. Here from where I am right now, I'm going through a lot of challenges. I have observed in our conversation and exchanges, I have always been intrigued as to why humanity took directions of separating oneself and from our own inner connection with our essence. So I've been very much in connection with what, nature is something that is around me, and I live in nature and all that. But my teachings have come from this intriguing questioning always, how did we depart so easily from our essence and separated and been, so far apart? That's something that has always questioned and, been present in me. It's like this, I lost the authority over myself and gave my power away totally. So here in our exchange, we've been asking, well, how is it that we acknowledge and are able to really identify how we have been sieged, like Castaneda said, how do I tell you that you've been sieged, by this alien force? So we're talking about the shadows, this dark side, but how did that happen? And I remember as a young little teenager, perhaps a little bit close to 18 years old, and having panic attacks, because even though at that time there was no cells, there wasn't that, but I could see robots running back and forth in the main street. And I would just look at that and say, is that us? Are those humans? What is this? It was like robots. And I desperately cried out and I said, I don't want to see this anymore. I needed, I had a panic attack because I had no idea but actually what I was seeing was what was happening to us humans, that we were giving our power away totally to this authoritarianism, and today more than ever to media and all that. And how do I see that within myself? That's the main question in my walk of these days now, is how do I see that I've been taken over? And the way I do it is by stalking myself, observing myself. Here I am, like Gurdjieff would say, we're on a track, we're going in a direction, and then all of a sudden in the law of seven, we lose track and we need something that will pull us back in. But what are these dark forces that distract us and want to keep us separate? The more separate we are from one another, the more divided we are, it's easier to be taken over. But when we come together and help one another and exchange like we're doing today, doing this, like a web, working together, then we have a chance of being who we really are. But to me, this notion of obsessors, and I've had experiences where I realized clearly that I was, especially when I'm sad, and my body is my main tool. I feel pain here or something like that. I say, what is that? What's going on? And I stalk myself and I see it's this something that is coming there and saying, come on, cut the, you're not doing right. You shouldn't be doing this. And, or, whatever inner talk that just invades me, literally invades me. So the most important thing for us, I think, is to acknowledge and to see that we are far from our real nature, and that we need one another to, be more aware of that and come back to who we really are and not give our power away. So like domestication, this artificial system. And to me, I really feel this distraction of taking me away from my path, of moving me away. It's like being invaded, literally being invaded by this shadow, even though I'm a quote light worker, I'm on the path, of waking up and helping and being at service. I also find myself getting distracted, being pulled back to the artificial system. Who's doing that? So the most important thing here, and I'm going to just be very brief because there's others that want to share also, is to be aware when we get off track that something's pulling us away from our real, unique self. Either medicines, power medicines, because I live in Brazil, ayahuasca, this and that, and all these kinds, how easy it is to fall in the, instead of using it in a correct form, get distracted with it. So I'm not going to talk too much because I know there's Lenny and Marsha on the road here too. But this is a topic that to me is essential. It has always been pulling me and asking, how are we here after World War, all these wars, and we're back here in Brazil? A lot of, things are happening that are difficult, shadow, but light is here also. But we have to look at it and not point fingers and see that we are also being pulled and being distracted. So that's just a personal sharing of experience. And so I'll pass the baton to Lenny or to Marcia, whomever wants to be on the conversation right now, because it's important to share. This is the only way we can, wake up and keep going. Path of heart, neither left nor right, in the heart. Lenny or Marcia?
So welcome, Grandmother Marcia.
Yes, thank you. I can't impress enough about the becoming conscious, becoming aware. I saw for myself, I've always thought, oh, I'm not that sensitive. I don't feel and I don't know what's going on. I'm not aware of things. And there are a couple places where I actually became aware of dark energies that had been, one of them was a family momentum, where I grew up in a large family, and my oldest brother was jealous of all the other siblings because he was he was the only child for 2 years, and then the others came along, and he all had this anger that he carried as being not the only child anymore, not the principal focus of our parents, and he was actually abusive to us. And it wasn't until I was taking care of him while he was dying that 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 dark side of him being abusive really I became aware of that because I loved him so much. It's like I didn't identify that abusiveness as abusiveness. I just said, well, that's the way he is, and I loved him anyway, and kind of made excuses for it and stayed loving him. And it wasn't until at one point in time, while I was taking care of him, he got so angry and so abusive to me that I actually addressed that abusiveness and said and denied taking it on myself and making excuses for it anymore. I said to him, if this abusive spirit doesn't go away, I'm leaving, and you can do whatever you need to do on your way to and your dying breath. And it's interesting to me how being around people who are dying, that also happened with my daughter. What I realized with my daughter, she started young in life, being what I would call a working alcoholic. She would be into alcohol, and then but she worked, and she was brilliant, and she was just an amazing woman. And then she'd go into her private spaces and be into alcohol. And while she was in my home, and as she was dying, there was one point in time where I could feel the spirit of alcohol in the room, and I addressed it and drove it out of the room. She is not yours. But it's so seductive, and it's so accepted in our culture to take that alcohol and to have it be a social event. And when I realized that at my daughter's death, I haven't touched alcohol at all since then. And I really, and in the internet, there came a I don't know if it was TikTok or what it was, but it was actually saying the name of the spirit of alcohol, and saying, look, at the spirit's name is alcohol, and that means body eating spirit. And the awareness to me. And now, even one day I was sitting at my desk, and I'm so busy and so overwhelmed. And that busy and overwhelm is something that happens, and we don't see it as the spirit of busy and overwhelm. And I was sitting here working on something, and just that awareness, the subtle awareness of the my jaw. I had tension in my jaw, and I had this angry feeling in my body. And so I looked to see in my own body that tension in my jaw and the pressure that I was felt, and then just relieved it, let the spirit go, whether it's archetypal or whether it was something. It was something, a habit that I carried with me. Many times we lock into habits that are darker than who we really are. So it, for me, and on the path to this conversation today, as we're working through and thinking and feeling for ourselves, how this is in our culture, how this is in our world. And that was where it occurred to me, that observation of myself on the process. What is it? Because in psychological terms, they call it a psychosis, and it really is the spirits we're talking about, and they live in those blind spots. Like when I was taking care of my brother, all my life with him, he was abusive to all of us. And I never realized that abusive energy until I was in that moment observing it. And with my daughter, I didn't observe the darkness of her attachment and the societal attachment, because I would join her for a social drink. Well, that was like encouraging the darkness and taking it on even in my own body. So for me, on the path here, observing myself to get here and be with this dark energy and really embrace it through the awareness, and not only just embrace it, but take responsibility for my own ability to clear it not only from my own being, because when I clear it from my own being, I release it from the society that much, as I'm recognizing it in my own carrying it into the world. So looking for those blind spots, the awareness of the blind spots and the opportunities that we have in life, they don't have to be those grueling opportunities like with the alcohol, and it was devastating to me. It was so intense, but sometimes it's so subtle. And those subtleties, when we let them ride, grow into the intensities. So the awareness of ourselves and honoring that's part of the journey here. It's not just as light workers, yes, everything's light, and we don't talk about or look into or take responsibility for the dark side, because if we don't, there's no balance for the dark and light. So thank you for being here, and thank you for sending us on the journey to be here today and what we learned on the way.
Great. Thank you, Grandmother Marcia. And we're going to go now up into, I think it's been pretty cold up there. He's hibernating away like the bears, but still keeping busy. I want to welcome from Wisdom Council, our brother and wisdom keeper, Lenny.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, it has been cold up here, but that's the time of year, and it's actually very welcoming. You get the nice blankets of snow, and things are pristine, and you don't have those dark shadows. You have all that bright whiteness shining everywhere. So there's a blessing in this as well. I've really appreciated the sharing going on today. So many good points, and everybody's been bringing up and how we recognize those dark things that try to creep in around the cracks of us. I want to share a little bit about what I shared last time, a little bit about the Wendigo. It's known by different things in First Nations. That's what we call First Nations people up here in the US. We call them Native Americans. Gail was touching on this. Everything is energy, and it's not something separate from us. We are all part of it. We walk with it. It's not even that we walk with it. We are of it. It goes through us. It's all around us. And that cosmology is what First Nation people walk with. And it's really important to understand that if you really want to understand the nature of these spirits, it's not, the Western world will say it's something psychological, it's something within yourself, but when you recognize that there are spiritual forces out there, and the Wabanaki call them Cree Watiko. The Iroquois, they have another one, they call it stonecoats, which is like a rock native person. But all of these, which is also the Wendigo for the Ojibwe or the Anishinaabe, it's one that actually translates to evil that devours mankind. And that's what we're talking about here. Talking about that evil that comes in the cracks, comes in and takes us over, or takes those that we know over, and then tries to get at us in some way. To the Anishinaabe, the Manitou. Manitou means spiritual being. Spiritual beings can be good, benevolent. They can be indifferent, or they can be harmful to us. And it's that harm that we're talking about today. Those beings that come in and be harmful. And they've been recognized through all these nations that I've mentioned. They tell them in their stories. That's why we know of the Wendigo. That's why we know of these dark forces that consume actually our flesh, the flesh of those around us. And you can offer them other food, but it's the human flesh that they want. And these are very real. They've wait up until basically the colonists stopped First Nations from practicing the ceremonies. There's been recorded. Last time I talked about the recording of the first hanging in Alberta was possession of a Wendigo, that it consumed his whole family. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about, there's a Anishinaabe elder. He's a professor, and he's actually written a kind of a way he takes his students and uses the Wendigo in film to introduce them to the subject of those dark forces. He shares a story. His name is Brody DeSanti, this professor, and he shares this story of Trapper George. Let's see if I can find the exact story here for you. So those in any future period, they can become cannibals through their dreams. Sometimes they dream of them. Gail was talking a little bit about they can come in your dreams. Well, Trapper George gives us a story. He was a Cree. So this is from his culture. I was invited by the North, or the spirit of the North, to them, because again, like in the Mi'kmaq language, for instance, they have animate and inanimate. Things have life. So that's what I'm talking about, the cosmology, when you really get into it. So when we have like a blueberry, the color blue, well, that is blue to them. Blueberry, it's something that becomes, it's something that is moving through us at all times. It's not an object out there that we see. So these beings are there. They're always moving through the energy that we move through. And if we invite them in or allow them in, then they can become part of our energy, become part of our life force. And that's how they take us over. So he gives us an interesting dream. He was invited by the North spirit to partake of a feast of ducks. Oh, the most beautiful he had ever seen. They were well cooked and roasted and delicious. The dishes were all set before him. But then a stranger touched his arm. and said, "Eat not thou of that. Look into thy dish." And behold, that child who had taken for the wing of a duck was actually the arm of a child. Whew! What a narrow escape, said I. And then he took me into another room and gave me this most excellent meat, so tender, most delicious in appearance I've ever seen. But again, it didn't feel right. And then I discovered it was the flesh of Indians thus served up to me. So then he took me into a third room and gave me tongues, which were a specialty. These were also tongues of Indians, it turned out. "Why refusest thou that I offer thee? Is it not good?" "Well, I feel no inclination to eat," I replied. And then he took me into a fourth room where there were these beautiful fine hearts. They were served like, oh, I desired to eat them. They they were just perfect. But again, I refused. Then he said to me, "But it's well done." And then, had I had taken of these, if I had eaten them, I would have been led in to become a cannibal. And then the cannibal would become a Wendigo. So this was one way that's been quoted in other stories and other tales that have been orally passed down through the grandmothers and the elders and the storytellers of the different tribes, that it can come to you in dreams. It can come to you. And then they often say, well, this is what he says, Trapper George, "Those that eat of these feasts are frequently universally told that it's a sign to thee that one day thou might become and eat the flesh of the fellows. When thou shalt see the children play and eat ice or snow in thy tent, my time is near, for then they shall too soon eat the human flesh." And it's been known, some of the stories that have been told, to be someone, a native trapper, going through the woods, going about his business, and all of a sudden, it can be cold, it can be winter, but it'll even get colder all around him. A chill will enter him, strange noises he'll hear. Those are signs of the Wendigo. Other things recorded about the Wendigo to recognize. Where is a Wendigo? He usually lives alone. He doesn't only time he really interacts with humans is when he stalks them, wanting to eat them. You look at him, very gaunt. There's nothing left. He's basically just skin on bones. Chews his own lips. As Gail said, if we step outside of human communities, if we isolate ourselves, if we don't have, like we have here, many times when Wendigo has tried to get us, negative influences, even influence our counsel here. But we have each other to direct us back, to point out to us, be aware, something doesn't seem right here. Something is off with us today. And sure enough, we could see those signs. I'll give you an example from my own life of those friends of mine. They both spent much time in Peru working with ayahuasca. And I won't speak to the negative or the positive ayahuasca because it's a medicine. It's a medicine that's been used in the Amazon for millennia to get to know the jaguar, to know plants. And used in that way, it's very powerful medicine. My friend spent a lot of time down there and she's worked with the medicine. She's done the diet here in a good way and learned a lot of these different Amazonian plants and the spirit of the plant, including the tree of life that is down there. So there's very powerful parts. And she had an ex-partner that also was down there doing it. And he did the ceremonies. But one thing about the ayahuasca practitioners, or shaman as we call them, I don't call them shaman, but other people do. I just call them medicine people, is that they come from an area where it can also be something very powerful that they use to protect the tribe, to protect themselves, or to get other things. So it's not always used in a good way. So her ex-partner, he also worked with them. But one of the persons he was working with was one using the dark side. So he's doing the same thing as the person with the light, but that allowed a dark entity, spirit, Manitou, that other than human, but of human, to enter him. So all of a sudden, she's in Hawaii and she starts getting these texts from him. Haven't seen him from quite a while. They're nice texts. They're okay. Just kind of how you doing? What's going on? Then she starts having these dreams where this partner enters the dream and tries to get her to accept things from him. From, how are you doing? Come, you should come, you should do this with me. And she found in her daily life that things were going wrong and things weren't going right. And all these dark thoughts were entering into her. And that's what Marsha was talking about, those dark thoughts. And Patricia, we have to always be aware of those thoughts. And she talked to me a little bit about it. And I said, well, maybe it's not him. Maybe he allowed a spirit into him. And I think it's a spirit through him that is using him and coming in his form to find a way to get at you. Because that's what darkness does. It looks for a crack. It looks for a way in. Just like in the Trapper George. It came offering him this delicious food. Please eat. Please take this. And if you take it in, invite it in, you open that crack and it can come in. So when she recognized that, she just, whenever it came in the dream after that, in some of these dreams, she was wide awake. She wasn't sleeping. Then it had no power over her. No power whatsoever. Because there's only power if we give it power. We have to give that place in ourselves and invite it in. So please don't invite it in. Be strong. Think of that awareness that Patricia and Marsha were talking about, that we walk with. And to me, that's the Sacred Seven teachings that we've been talking about. The sacred hoop. When we walk the hoop, we're connected. And that's been said by the others tonight. You'll have that intuitive feeling something is off, something's not right. It just doesn't feel right. And that's what my friend was feeling. And that's why she recognized this wasn't her ex-partner, because of that feeling of something not being right. And we only have that when we walk totally connected within the hoop, walking in a good way. When we follow those teachings and walk that way, then we will have that awareness intuitively, instantly, because it's just part of how energy works. It's part of how it all walks together with us. The spirits will let us know when things aren't right, as well as those spirits trying to knock at our door and find cracks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. So such a rich topic, and one frequently kicked under the rug or stuffed in a closet or best avoided. And, so again, the focus of today is how do we identify these forces? And in the few minutes I have, I always appreciate speaking at the end because it really gives me a long list of things I'd like to say and material to draw from, even though I do some level of homework. And not only that, but since we're speaking from direct experience, I have a lot of experience in this particular area. So identifying these forces, the malevolent and destructive forces, I say that damage the sacred hoop, that control humanity. They bring in all of these other things, like greed, jealousy, anger, fear, envy, lust. Also a big one, blame. Seems like not many people want to take responsibility for their reality anymore, and it's always easier to blame someone else, an external force. But one of the things that I find that's interesting is, again, how do we identify these forces? I think we identify them by these different types of attributes, attributes that kind of takes away from our more spiritual sacred nature, even though, as Lenny and others had said, in the yin and the yang, there's light with seeds of dark and dark with seeds of light. So there is very much a dance of learning and evolution that happens as we bounce up against these different experiences and revelations and perceptions, and we look at our own perceptions and our projections, and all of these are part of our very unique individual experience. But how I recognize some of these forces is the lack of humility. I tend to find some of the greatest spiritual luminaries I've had the honor to be with or be around have incredible humbleness and humility and surrender, because in a way they're very at peace and nourished and some level of wholeness within their own radical self-responsibility of, being in the
I'm sure Michael will be back online soon. We just lost signal. Hopefully for just a moment. He'll be able to continue to wrap things up. There he is.
I was on the call the whole time without a glitch, and then I start speaking. So I'm just going to say this is exactly one of the things I wanted to talk about. So, of course, things like the lack of humility, the lack of being able to surrender one's position as opposed to going to battle over truth. I'll be as bold to say I don't think I've ever met any being, including people, very high lamas, people like the Dalai Lama, and very just amazingly enlightened, compassionate, kind, loving people that really wanted to go to war over their beliefs. So I think those are ways that I can identify it. And something that just came up is because I produce events, I've been very involved for really decades in trying to further human evolution, bring more awareness about the planet, and cultivate the highest potential. How I identify it is by opening a door of opportunity and collaboration. And I don't want to give away all my secrets, but typically, if you open a door of opportunity, people will rush in, both embodied or incarnate or disembodied or interdimensional beings will rush through that doorway to either collaborate or participate or be more to bring chaos and divisiveness and to bring in other things that can be destructive, especially when you have a very clear mission about doing things in the world. You know, as a musician, I stopped doing music because I didn't want to cater to unconsciousness. I didn't want to be a beer salesman. I didn't want to cater to people who were just doing spiritual bypass or getting intoxicated or just getting high. I even though I did that for many years globally, I decided that as a musician, I didn't really want to cater so much to that energy because part of recognizing it is recognizing it in ourselves and what we open up and what we give energy to. But I will say, after many, major transformational events, like, from 20,000 people in 1994 at the World Unity Festival at the Grand Canyon. Never have I ever seen so much divisiveness. And I literally became under attack at that event for cultivating the idea that people are connected regardless of religious belief, race, gender, generation, tradition, and then other things. But typically, I recognize it by inviting setting out a doormat, welcoming people in. And most of the times people come who are mission aligned and want to collaborate, and they bring something to it. They don't come there to take away from it or to divide it or bring chaos or destructive forces. And then that gets deeper into other aspects. But again, identifying forces, we of course have spiritual, physical, mental, emotional aspects of ourselves. So I would say physically, the more I do my own spiritual work, the more I do eat better food, the more I do my own cleansing and purification. And this can be things like sweat lodges or meditation, getting in touch with that sacredness within myself. Very much also like what Gail was saying, I can pretty much physically feel people pretty quickly. And sometimes, that can translate in a number of ways, but, we all have our digestive biome. We have our stomach, and that actually is a big part of connected to our heart and our heart coherence, and our gut. Like I feel it in my guts, is very much tied to our intuition and our heart and this vibrational field that surrounds our bodies, up to like 20 to 30 feet. And pretty much when things enter into that field, you can pretty much feel them. I'm right now, I'm sitting next to this amazing, probably 600-year-old redwood tree. And I can feel that. I can feel the groundedness. I can feel the anchoredness. And it's been interesting because since we started this podcast, I'm sitting quietly up on this porch and people have been coming up here with music and people walking up, saying, oh, I'm going to sit by this tree and get high. Or, I've just been like contending with this whole wave of onslaughts of everything in some ways we've been talking about. So, it's been a little bit distracting, but I think it's easy because we are opening a door of conversations around these things. I'm really looking forward to, how do we kind of defend or combat these energies that can, again, have really destructive effects on our health, on our emotional state of being, on a person's psychology. I've even seen people, I appreciate what Patricia said too, and really all of members of the Wisdom Council. I've been in a lot of situations where people have done, medicine or psychoactive plants or, whatever it is, and have literally became possessed. I think we live in an age right now where people are dissatisfied with the old narrative that we're like, we're a body and we're born and we live these many years and then the body dies. And we live in this matrix of consumerism and capitalism and all these things. I think people are truly dissatisfied and want something more. But the warning comes with when we start to really explore other aspects of ourself. And sometimes you have to bump up against things as part of learning, right? You fall down and scrape your knee. It's like, no, I can't run down this hill at full speed because I'm going to fall and get hurt. But the point being that in our experience, I think a lot of people are truly hungry for something more. So as we begin our spiritual journey, I see this so prolifically now. There's so much drugs, and things that people use. And not only that, but the other side, like Lenny was, and Marcia was speaking about too. I mean, people can get caught up in alcoholism. I mean, they call it spirits for a reason. So there's really a whole plethora of things I could go into. I think one of the things I tend to recognize is when people want to do spiritual bypass, there's an avoidance to actually look at reality. And of course, reality is semi-subjective. But I think, if people don't want to hear anything that conflicts with their narrative or their perception of reality or their story, they tend to want to avoid it or just kind of spiritual bypass. I say they want to throw fairy dust on it and kind of avoid it. And I'm all for transforming things with positivity, but how many mountains of fairy dust do you need to actually get your hands into the quagmire and the sewage of the human condition and do the work to help clean that up, as opposed to throwing more fairy dust and confetti, into that space. So again, this is a very rich and diverse topic. I also want to mention one of the things we talked about last week was the dark side of light working. And I know it's a book. And I do want to say, in this day and age where people are so hungry for something more and something spiritual, I see rampant spiritual capitalism, spiritual and cultural appropriation. And we're kind of in this age where everything is for sale. I mean, I can go to some places in the United States and then everybody's a healer, a medicine man or a woman, and a god and a goddess, and everybody's armed with, pouches of psychedelics and different types of plant medicines. And I mean, it is kind of a signal that the general society is changing. But I think one of my teachers, Chogyam Trungpa, a Tibetan monk, used to talk a lot about spiritual materialism. Spirituality is something that comes from within. Things can help you. The physical world are tools, but inevitably it has to come from within. And if you're addicted to these plants, or you're appropriating them or exploiting them or selling them, that's a whole other extreme slippery slope. And people might not like hearing this, but it's become to almost like a fashion right now and trend that I see happening. So these are some of the things I want to bring up. I think part of it too is just we can vibrationally usually feel things. We know we live in a universe of frequency, of sound and vibration and light. We all feel things. Sometimes if someone walks into a room, people will look at each other like, oh, or someone walks in with good energy and it can lift the whole vibe of the room. One of the things I wanted to mention, though, is that a long time ago, I had the opportunity to spend time with some Huichol medicine people. And what was interesting, they said that in their travels, and they go all over the world, they said in their travels that these plant medicines have become more and more popular. What they suggested is because there's so many portals and dimensional things opening and so many dark entities that have agendas that are trying to get humanity off of the positive timeline. And again, this is even carved into an ancient stone in Hopi land on Prophecy Rock, that there's a zigzag that goes off into chaos and self-destruction, but there's one that comes back to the earth, comes back to simplicity. And like some of the Hopi say is like, will that truth grow corn? Like, will it actually bear fruit? But they said is, the time right now for people to do a lot of these plant medicines that are, a lot of them are lunar. They're not really ever exposed to the sun. Things like psilocybins and others, that these are lunar plants. They tap into the subconscious mind. They tap into the roots and kind of the underworld energy of human consciousness. If we look at it like a tree of life, like in the Kabbalah or Mayan or many traditions, that a lot of people can go down into these rabbit holes and roots and can really be damaged by a lot of the collective history of that plant and the psychological trauma and the damage. Their suggestion was, and I'm not saying I'm advocating, is that people should go towards the light And they mentioned things like San Pedro and peyote and some of these other plants that uh, absorb and harness the solar energy, the light frequency. And for many of us, we see the incredible amount of light activities that's been happening recently with solar flares and the planet's magnetic field. So they said, to go beyond the physical body to really get into whatever people want to call it, the ascension realms or the higher frequencies. They were like, go to the light, go to the solar medicines. If you go into the lunar medicines, you're going down these rabbit holes. And of course, I'm sure it benefits. I know it benefits a lot of people that are dealing with trauma and stuff, but it's a very slippery slope. So all of these things are doorways and portals that can invite in these energies and entities and parasitic things like hungry ghosts that want to feed on your human energy and stuff. So again, it's such a rich subject. I won't go into more about that, but I think for me, one of the biggest things, I look at people's actions and I don't even listen to their words a lot of the time, because actions do speak louder than words. And whether I'm sitting here quietly speaking, or I'm wearing some fancy regalia, or maybe a headdress of eagle feathers, or I have on these sacred necklaces and all these talismans, and I'm kind of, let's say, doing the costume, which is fine. I honor traditions and I honor the pageantry and the things that come with that. But I see a lot of people wearing costumes to proclaim a certain level of spirituality. And I tend to try to look at their words and their intention. I mean, you can ask anybody right outside, right in the world, what is your intention right now? And if they can't clearly, lucidly express that, there might be some shadow energy lurking that their intention is to, ingest your energy, to go to the light and get that for themselves, is for control, for power. And I think the last thing I like to say, the biggest thing I see, is human beings and their relationships towards children and the relationships to women, to the sacred feminine within ourselves, but also within society. And that's why in our Wisdom Council, we always give that place of honor and respect to the grandmothers and to the feminine, to help start these discussions and give them a sensitive, sacred space that we hold for them to speak without being run over by the patriarchal and the masculine and the dominating, extractive, more patriarchal, controlling energy, as opposed to more of the maternal energy. So that's how I like to say for now. There's a lot of ways to recognize it in our mind, in our bodies, in our feelings and vibrations, watching people's actions, watching what people do, and just looking and feeling what's real with that. So at that point, I'd like to open up the circle, whoever would like to add some final thoughts, and that'll bring us more towards closure for this week. So thank you all for joining us. Seems like that might be it. And I don't know if anyone, it's very wet and soggy out here. I did bring a drum to maybe share a song, but it's pretty wet. But I am just looking at this amazing redwood, like incredible. So I feel the benevolence of that. And then I feel that in light of the human condition. And, I think, nature's intelligence really makes everything very clear. And I think we just have to be more immersed in nature. I love aspects of technology, but, less screen time, less things that divide us, more things that bring us together. And
Well, what
most
occurs to
all,
me,
whatever
what
you feel. Go ahead.
occurs to me is to trust what you're feeling, trust that intuition, trust that part of you that is present and aware.
Yes, and always keep asking your heart or yourself, who's talking, who's here right now? Question yourself all the time whenever you go downhill and are, angry or sad or whatever. Ask yourself, who's talking, who's feeling this? Keep aware and keep asking yourself, and you'll be very surprised.
So session next month is about more ways of dealing with this. Gonna go deeper into how to handle these things once you recognize and become aware of them. Hope to see you all again in January.
Thank you so much. And please feel free to share this link. We do feel this is an important message. And typically we have closed council meetings and then put it up later, but we felt it was important to do these live on YouTube to invite in the voices and questions and thoughts of all of you out there. I mean, we are a council. We're very grounded over the last year or more of being authentic and talking through things. And even though we've all agreed to disagree on some things, there really is incredible unity and resonance, especially since we started all of these series with mending the sacred hoop. So please share this. And I want to thank, Grandmother Gail for helping to carry the sacred fire of these councils for a long time. And for Patricia, who I know it's very late in Brazil, and the work she does there on the land, not seeking fame or fortune, but working very powerfully and very quietly with the land and the community there, which that area just hosted the big global environmental gathering. And Marsh, with the amazing work she does around understanding the spiritual nature of sovereignty, and incredible work that she does, and her wisdom coming from many traditions. And of course, our wisdom keeper, sharer, brother, Lenny, all the way up in Canada, who is joining us and bringing his wisdom and his stories and his amazing experiences. And of course, I want to thank Pamela for helping with the broadcast. And I'm honored to continue to be here. And we have been known to make public appearances and events coming up. And I know there's some stuff coming up over the next few months. And I also know Grandmother Gail hosts a transformation dance and other types of events. So there's plenty of wisdom being offered without hype and commercialism or having to wear masks or we're trying to sell anything. So thank you for just being available to share this message of unity, of mending the hoop, and a sometimes avoided topic of we're under attack by these forces. And now that we're identifying them, most importantly, next month is how do we defend ourselves and protect ourselves and those that we care about. And plenty more to come. And we're just days away from winter solstice, the long, dark night as we move back towards the light. So thank you, one and all, for your time and your sacred presence.